Welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with David Clement, no relation. He's the North American Affairs Manager of the Consumer Choice Center. David, let's switch gears away from drinking, although this may drive people to drink. Talk about Bill C-18, the Online News Act. What are your thoughts on this piece of legislation?
I think it has the relationship between tech companies like Facebook and publishers backwards. So essentially, the government wants so every time, let's say you write something for a major publication, Tony, you share it on your social media. A bunch of people click on it. You're a pretty popular guy, and so it gains some traction, and you might have had something insightful to say. They want Facebook to pay the newspaper every time somebody clicks on that link and views the article. Now, for me, I think the relationship there is backwards because by posting something you've written to Facebook, you've essentially sent free leads, free advertising dollars to the newspaper, and free opportunities for them to solicit subscriptions, which of course they rely on. And so, what appears to be completely backwards, I think, is really just an attempt to try and generate more revenue for the newspaper industry, which is struggling, and doing so in a really nefarious way.
Now, in no circumstances was there a case where like the big incumbents like Google or Meta, they never charge uh, they never charge the newspapers or the broadcasters for access there. So there's never been
No,
a
I mean,
situation like
certainly
that.
newspapers could pay to promote on
Okay,
social media, which
got
they've
it.
done.
Yeah,
Um, but you sharing a link or I sharing a link of something I've written and people clicking on it, more or less is a movement of views, but it is not monetized in any way.
gotcha, gotcha. What do you make of Google's and Meta's reactions to this then?
Well, so Facebook Meta has decided to start the process of not allowing Canadians to share Canadian news links on Facebook. This is not good um, from a political awareness perspective. A lot of people rely on social media for what is relevant and trending, but it's a totally understandable reaction for Facebook because they're essentially being told they have to pay for something, and they don't want to violate the law and not pay. So they're simply just going to prevent people from putting them in a scenario where they would be forced to pay. And I think the reaction from this on the part of Ottawa is rather sensational because they're describing it as undermining democracy
Right.
and a lot of buzzwords and very charged language, but it's just a predictable reaction. It's a predictable corporate reaction to legislation. They do not want to break the law, and so they will create a scenario where they can't break the law, understandably so.
Now they tried the same thing in Australia, if I recall correctly. But again, in that situation, they backed off after a while. Is that right? Do you recall?
Well, it got rather complicated. Eventually, there was some sort of agreement between some of the large publishers and these tech platforms, and that's certainly a better way to go,
Right.
to let them iron it out and iron out their grievances rather than having the newspaper industry essentially strong arm via government lobbying big tech to send them a bunch of money for something they shouldn't be sending them money for.
Exactly. Should government be concerned about the state of journalism in any event, or
I,
kind of
I think
too far?
so. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think they should. I think it's a valid concern. I think we're in a bit of a generational shift. The digitization of news is something that needs to be accounted for and accommodated for. I'm not sure the government getting more involved in eroding the kind of sacred idea of a free and independent press is the way to go. I'm not suggesting that the subsidies that they give publications has done that. I don't think that the Globe and Mail or the National Post or the Toronto Star does the government's bidding because they get government funding. But it does make that relationship somewhat uncomfortable, and it makes them dependent. And I think that's really the problem here, is it makes them dependent on these subsidies via tax credit. And that is a problem because that will probably decrease the speed of whatever that next transition is for the news.
Right.